Okay, let's try this again. For some reason, my video keeps disappearing on me, and I'm going to go through it this time, and whatever happens, happens. Hey, Do, sorry about that. I don't know what happened. My video just would not do anything for me tonight. I did have a few announcements, but we'll just leave them for now. So I was talking about backgrounds. And, you know, as card makers, we always focus on the card design, the layout of the card, how we're going to cut our layers, and those are all fabulous things to focus on when you want to create the perfect card. And we all know that we are not perfect. Hey, Debbie, how are you? But many of us, and I'm included, I'll stamp my image on a plain white sheet of cardstock, and I'll either leave it on the white and put it on the front of my card, or I will fussy cut it and pop it up on a square or an oval, a circle, and that's perfectly fine. It's a wonderful way to create. But actually, have you ever thought about your background? The background changes the way your card looks. So what I did tonight is I created the same card with 3 different backgrounds. This first background, I'm using the very Versailles stamp set, which was in the old catalog, and they brought it back in the new catalog. And I'm using Mossy Meadow, Old Olive, 2 of my favorite colors. Hey, Peggy, how are ya? And Basic White. Now for this, I masked off the white, and I blended my color onto the background, and then stamped and embossed. And then for the inside, I just left it plain and added the same leaves on the inside. The second card, as you can see, I did get a little spot right there. I actually used vellum, or Stampin' Blends, and rubbing alcohol to get the look of, yeah, I know, Karen, I went live. I talked for probably 10 minutes, and then my daughter popped in and said, Mom, your video's not there. So we started all over 3 times. But it's good to see you. So this is vellum, Stampin' Blends, and rubbing alcohol. So it's the rubbing alcohol technique. And again, the inside is the same. For the third card, we're lucky enough with the new catalog to have beautiful designer series paper called Expressions in Ink. And the paper is actually just like doing the alcohol background, but it's already created for you. So I cut out the same size of the designer series paper, and I stamped and embossed for the same exact card, and did the same on the inside. So let's get started, and I'll show you exactly what I did. We're going to start with the blended card, because if you know me, if I do the messy first, everything will be downhill from there. So let's grab a piece of cardstock. And what I did was took a ruler and my handy dandy pencil, and I'm just going to mark an inch down from the top. And this basic white is actually 5 1/4 by 4. And I'm going to mark it on each side at 1 inch. And then I'm going to mark it again at 3 inches on both sides, just so I know where I have to mask. So they're just teeny tiny little lines. And then I'm going to use the tape and paper that I used before. Let me just move this up. And I'm going to line up my mask right on those dots or lines that I created. I'm actually going to put it right down onto the table. And then I'm going to do the same thing for the top. Now for me, you know, this is very important because I seem to always get ink all over everything. Just grab this little piece of whatever. Okay, so now we have our section masked off. It's a 2-inch section. And I'm going to grab the nice Stampin' Blend brushes. And I'm using, let's see, what did I use on here? I'm going to use the Soft Seafoam, Granny Apple Green, and then we're going to use the Mossy Meadow. And I may, excuse me, throw in some of the Old Olive, depending on how well it blends. Sorry, needed to take a drink. Now we're going to start with the lightest color, and that's the Seafoam. And what we're going to do, now I have a tendency, yeah, isn't that paper gorgeous, Karen? And, I mean, I'm using this side, but look at this side. It's just so beautiful. I can't wait until I use that set to create with. So I'm going to go with the Seafoam. Is that what I said it was? Yes. And you don't even need a heavy hand. You just very gently have to brush it over your paper. Now I'm keeping the lightest color on the right hand side corner. You don't really have to press too hard. I do have a heavy hand usually, and try to press it so hard that, you know, I end up hurting or my muscles start getting tight. But you really honestly don't need to press that hard. If you go nice and lightly, you get a really, really nice blend of color. So we're going to leave that corner like that. Then I'm going to grab the Granny Apple, and I'm not even going to change my brush. I'm going to use the same brush, and I'm going to go right over the edge of the Seafoam and blend in the Granny Apple right through the middle, getting a nice blend. And then we're going to jump to the Mossy Meadow. Oh my goodness, how wonderful, Karen. The horses are going to miss you, though. I'm sure they do get used to you being there. I had mini horses, and they were just so sweet. We had, at one time we had 6 mini horses and 52 goats. I think I had 6 dogs. We had chickens. It was wonderful. A lot of work, but it was wonderful. Okay, so I want to get a nice dark color on this end. So I'm just going to keep layering the color on. And if you notice, I don't start with my brush on the paper. I start off so you don't get a blotch. And you're just going to circle the brush to get that color on. And of course, the more layers you put on, the darker it's going to become. Now I'm just going to go back to the Granny Apple Green. I'm going to just wipe off my brush a little bit. Now these brushes you can wash, but you'd have to let them dry for a little bit. Okay, so that looks really good. So we're going to just let this dry for a second. Let the ink settle a little bit. Thanks, Karen. Oh, two of them are hers. Okay. Sweet. And I pulled out the writing from the stamp set. And I'm using Smoky Slate. I get these cards out of the way. And I'm just going to grab a piece of scrap paper. And I am just going to ink up and stamp off. I'm going to stand up and I'm just going to give a good stamp with the writing. So it's very, very subtle. And then we're going to put that stamp aside and grab our leaves. And we're going to use the Mossy Meadow. And you could use the Old Olive, but I wanted some nice dark leaves. And I am going to, again, ink up. And for the first batch, I stamped off. And I'm just going to stamp my leaves onto the front, ink up again. This time we're going to use full strength. And what I'm going to do is lift off this one edge. And I'm just going to tuck it over because I want the leaves to come down. So we're going to stamp it just like that. So the leaves are hanging down past our background. Just going to clean this off. And we're going to let this dry for a couple minutes. And while it's drying, just going to put this back really careful. And I'm just going to grab my heat tool and we're just going to make it a little faster drying time. Okay. So now that we have our green, and the reason I wanted to dry it a little bit is I want to do the Versamark. And I should have grabbed a dryer sheet, and I did not tonight. So I may have to use a paintbrush. But I'm going to do the same thing. We're going to ink up, get a good inking of the leaves again. And we're going to go right over top, give it a good stamp, And now we're going to remove the masking. I'm going to put that aside. Not bad. Pull out the embossing powder. And get this embossed. Now the reason I said I wanted it to dry is you'll notice that the embossing powder adhered to all the spots that I had stamped. So I'm just taking my paintbrush. That's why if I would have used a dryer sheet, this wouldn't have happened. But it's just because the ink is still a little wet. You really do just need to let it dry really well. But I'm just going over all these leaves that were stamped, trying to leave the embossing that I want. One more section right here. Oh, let's get that off there. And I think that looks good. So let's get that heat gun. Now when you're embossing white, you want to make sure you do not leave it on too long. Watch that color, and if as you see it change, move your heat gun and go on to the next section, because the white emboss burns and turns brown. Okay, so just real quick, I'm going to throw this back on. Just like that. I'm grabbing the Frost White all-purpose ink, and there's some in the cap. Grabbing just an old paintbrush with some water, and I'm just diluting what is in the cap. Get a little bit more water in here. Giving it a good mix. And then we're just going to tap some of this ink right on the front, and it seems like we're getting it all over. I have little dots of this all over today. And then we're just going to let this dry for a few minutes. So we're going to take the mask off. I'm going to set this aside and then let it dry. And we'll work on the card base, because that'll be pretty quick and easy. So let me just put that aside. Get rid of all that embossing powder. Okay, so we have a Mossy Meadow base, and it's 8.5 by 5.5. Scored it 4 1/4. Then I have a layer of Old Olive, 5 3/8 by 4 1/8, and we're just going to adhere this. Now, can you hear my neighbor mowing the lawn? I don't have air conditioning in my craft room, so I have my window open. So that's my neighbor mowing. Too bad he wouldn't come over and mow mine. Okay, so we're just gonna layer this on the front. And like I always say, it's a 1/16 of an inch around the sides. Now for the inside, I'm using Mossy Meadow 5 3/8 by 4 1/8, and another piece of basic white 5 1/4 by 4. And all we're gonna do, use my scrap. Let's do it this way. And I'm gonna grab the Mossy Meadow again. And I'm gonna stamp off once, and then stamp the second one, just for a little contrast of color. And then I'm going to leave the inside just like that. I'm not doing anything special to it. We're doing nice, clean, and simple cards. Let's clean that off. And hopefully the cards will stay clean and I don't make a disaster on any of them. Now I put the lid on this crazy glue and there we go. So we're just going to layer this together. Grab that little glue eraser. Okay. And we're just going to put this on the inside of the card. Doing the inside before the outside. And let's just grab this. Looks like it's dry. Now where this was embossed, the paper did curl a little bit, so I'm going to just make sure I have enough glue on my edges. And we're going to layer this on the front of the card. And I forgot to, we can do it right now. Forgot the sentiment. Okay, so we're going to use the Have a Beautiful Day. You know how I love my sentiments, so I have it on my block with the lines. Let's make sure it's right side up. And I'm just going to line up that line with the bottom of the blended color. And there's the first blended card. There we go. Nice, quick and easy, clean and simple. You could change the sentiment to, and, you know, make your, hey Fran, how are you? Yeah, the embossing, that's true. I actually probably should make my own embossing buddy, right? But I find that dryer sheets work really well. So that's what I stick to. So there's card number 1, okay? The blended background. So let's grab the designer series paper. We're going to do exactly the same thing. Now this time, what I'm going to do is I'm going to do it backwards. We're going to, let me just clean my stamp. I am going to actually emboss first and then grab a piece of paper towel. Let me just see if I have any floating around in here, and I don't. Let me just grab an alcohol wipe. That'll work. By the time I need it, it'll be dried out a little bit. Okay, so I grabbed a wipe. So we're going to do the embossing first this time. Get off the fold. And we're going to ink up and stamp. Grab the embossing powder. Now this is great. Like I said, the paper is already done for us. Okay, so grab my gun. I should say heat tool. And if you can see, as the color changes, just make sure you move the heat tool. Because it does have a tendency to burn. Okay, so now we have it embossed. So we'll go backwards. Let's grab that mossy meadow. And we're going to ink up, stamp off, and stamp on, and then ink up again. And before I do that, let's just, I'm going to just hit these leaves real quick to take the ink off the emboss section. Okay, we're going to grab our white, and again, just real quick, I only need the mark at the top, so I'm just gonna quick mark an inch, and again mark an inch, because I want those leaves on the front of my card. So I have to mask off where I don't want to stamp. So we're just going to line up our piece right at the bottom of the tape, ink up our stamp, and we're going to stamp our dark leaves. Now we have our little bit of leaf on the bottom of on our basic white. So we're just going to put that aside for a second. We're going to just grab our wipe. I'm just going to hit a couple of these spots. Just very carefully. It's almost like, what was that? The magic coat, where you stamp and clear, do your background, stamp and clear. Okay, so now we have that stamped. We're going to go back to our words and our slate gray, and we're going to ink up and stamp off. Now I want to make sure that my writing is on here pretty straight. Now we have our writing on the background. Our leaves are stamped. So let's go back to, let's get some in the cap. Our paintbrush. And we're just going to just have to make sure you have enough water. We're just spritzing it on. We're going to let that dry. And let's start with the card base again. And it's a repeat of card number 1. Basic card base, 8.5 by 5.5. Whoops. And you see? That paint gets all over. You turn it over. And then we have a layer of 5 3/8 by 4 1/8. And we're going to layer that onto the front of the card. Just like that. Okay. And we're going to do the same thing to the inside. Mossy Meadow, 5 3/8 by 4 1/8. And Basic White, 5 1/4 by 4. And we're going to grab our leaf again. Let's make some room here. I'm just going to move that up so I can stamp off. I have ink on my fingers. Let me just get a white. Otherwise, my white will be completely spotted and I won't be able to fix it. These, I have, just try to save, not spreading ink all over. I have wipes that are alcohol wipes, and it does help because it pretty well gets the ink off your hands. Okay, so we're going to stamp off and add our leaves, and then we're going to do a full stamp. Just like that. Close up the ink. Let me just wash this off. Okay. And again, make sure that's dry. Put this on the inside of the card. And then by that time, let's move this, because that's what I think I have all the splatter on. It is a messy, doing the splatters, you seem to get it all over the place. Just going to turn this over. Okay. Let's get this on the inside of the card. All right, and so now you remember we have our background with the leaves. Now we're going to, this should be dry now. Now we still have the little lines at the 1-inch mark. Just want to make sure I have enough glue. I'm just going to turn it sideways so I can see my lines. And I'm just going to line it up. I'm going to just stand it up to make sure. Oh, I just smeared that. I'm going to turn it over so I don't smudge it. Okay, now you can see I have just a little tiny overhang, so it's a little, I cut it a little longer than it should have been, so we're just going to put it in here, give it a quick trim, just like that. A little tiny piece came off. No damage done. Let's get that sentiment on. All right, Karen, we'll talk to you in a little bit. I'm just going to clean this sentiment off, and let's give it a good stamp. Have it the right way up. And again, I'm just going to line up my line with the bottom of that paper. And as long as that paper is on straight, my sentiment should be straight. I'm going to close this up, grab the card base, and put this on the front of the card. Making sure it's straight. Got a little bit of glue. I'm always afraid if I rub the front of the card, it's going to smear. So we'll just put it upside down. Okay. And there is the second card using Designer Series paper. So it's the same, but it's different. So you do have the same card, but a completely different look. I think the card looks so much more finished, Nita, with the extra layer. It just frames that base. They are heavy, they are thicker cards, and it does take extra postage. But I just, like you, I like that extra added matte even to the inside. It just seems to finish it off. Okay, so let's start with the last card. Again, it's the same design, but let's go over how to create the background. So we've been working each card an inch down and then marking it again at 4 inches. Is that what I was doing? Is it 4 or 3? At 3 inches. So I cut a piece of vellum, which is 4 by 2. Now, in order to do this, you need rubbing alcohol. And this rubbing alcohol, sorry it looks so disgusting, But I have had this alcohol, I can say, probably forever. Probably 5 or 6 years. That's how much I use it. But I have more than one. But you need rubbing alcohol that is as close to 100% or 99% alcohol as possible. If you have Copic markers, you can use the blending solution that has a very high alcohol content. You can use, what is that vodka? It's the highest alcohol percent vodka. Or I can't even think of what the name is right now. But it has to be almost 100%. If you use alcohol in the 70s or in 80s, you will not get the same effect. So just keep that in mind when you're doing this. Okay, so we're just going to do it right on here. We already have it dirty. So what you're going to do, and I grabbed the same markers, dark mossy meadow, dark old olive, and dark granny apple green. Now I did grab the soft sea foam, and that is what is in this corner. So I may just add it to the bottom here, and all you're going to do is, using the brush end of your marker, is you are going to add color to the vellum. Let me put a clean piece so you can see at least what's happening. You can tell the sea foam is not that dark. And we're going to add this color the same way we actually added the color when we blended. And you're just going to add blotches. You can color it in. It doesn't have to be circles. But you just want to add your color to the vellum. Now this is the mossy meadow. And we're just going to add the color. Doesn't really matter what it looks like. I'm going to go back and just get that sea foam again and just add a little bit more. Okay, so now we have this crazy piece of vellum. I want you to grab a paintbrush, and any old paintbrush. You can use the our water painters is perfectly fine. You can add alcohol to these on the inside. You know, instead of adding water, you can add alcohol to them. And you're just going to I don't know how this has red on it. What did I use that was red? Just clean that off. We're just going to blot this with the alcohol and let it just do its own thing. Now you can put as much or as little alcohol as you want. It really depends on what kind of effect you want. But you have to remember, when you do this, you cannot create your card with it right away. You have to let it dry. Now you'll notice that the vellum does curl a little bit. So you may just want to take something and blot the alcohol on the edges. I'm just holding it down a little bit so it doesn't run. But like I said, you can't really use this on your card right away. You don't want to really heat dry it because you'll blow away all the pretty designs that you've just created. And then you just want it to dry. See, it does curl, but I want it to dry. So what I'm going to do is, since I can't use this on tonight's card, oops, it's an empty one, of course. Let's grab one that has some ink, some tape. Just going to put that there. I want this to dry flat. So I'm just going to stick that to the paper. And there is the background. If you put less alcohol, the color will be darker. If you put more alcohol, this is what you get. That's the effect you get. So here's the one I created before. And then this one is right here. So each time you do it, it is going to create something different. So I'm just going to put that aside. I actually did create one this afternoon, and like you can see, it does curl a little bit. And I did the flat leaves so it would be really nice and dry. But what I'm going to do is for the vellum, oops, something just fell. I'm just going to grab some tape and add it to the back. Where it curls, you want to make sure that it is laying flat for you when you want to stamp. So the tape comes off really easy. That's why I'm using it. Okay. So now it's laying nice and flat. Excuse me, I gotta get a drink. And we're gonna do the same thing on this piece. The only thing I don't have, and I can add it, oops, that's not what I want. I want the script. I'm going to lay it on here straight, because I don't know if you noticed, but on my other vellum piece, I stamped the greeting, or the script, crooked. So we're just going to add the script, and it's very, very light. You can just about see it, but we know it's there. And then I'm going to grab the leaf, and I don't think I marked, I didn't. Let's see. Okay. Let me just trim this piece off. We're going to quick so we want to put our lone leaf on. So I'm going to measure down 3. And you can do it the same way we did last time. But I'm going to do this. So I measured down 3. I'm going to put this mask down, hoping that it's straight. You're going to make sure everything is covered. And I'm just going to add some ink to the bottom leaves. And stamp. So now our leaves are on the front of the card. Can remove that. And we have our marks to put our vellum on. But now we want to emboss our vellum. So we're just going to pull this up. Before I do that, let's stamp it. And then I can emboss it, and hopefully it won't create a big disaster. So we're just going to grab our Versamark again. Ink it up. This has been drying, so hopefully it'll work. Give it a good stamp. Before I take off the tape, I'm going to emboss it and set it. So this way, whoops, I pushed it back on instead of taking it off. Okay, that worked. So make sure you let your ink dry really well. Nope. Okay, so here's a good example of not leaving the heat gun in one place too long. So I'm not going to be able to put this on the card. But can you see this color? You probably can't really tell. But right here where my thumb is, the white emboss, let me put a piece of paper behind it. Maybe you can tell that way. It burned. So if you use the heat gun on white embossing, make sure you don't hold it in one spot for too long, because it does burn and turn yellow. You probably really can't tell that well, but it is burnt. So since it is burnt and I do not have an extra piece, you would do exactly the same steps as we did with the other cards. You could splatter this with the ink, and then you would take it, and to adhere the vellum to the card, I did actually use tear and tape. Let me just grab that card. I put a strip of tear and tape at the top and, and at the bottom, and I set the top first, rubbed it down, and then swished it down so it would lay flat, because as you can see, it has a little bit of a curl. So you would put your tear and tape on. Let me just get this tape off. You'd put your tear and tape across the top, tear and tape across the bottom. We have our lines marked on the bottom for this, so you would line up one end and tack it, line it up on the other end, hold it down, and give it a good rub. And then once that is stuck, take your tape off the paper off of this end, and push up, hold it down, and then stick the top down. This way, you'll get a nice flat layer on the front of your card. Just make sure it's dry. See, if you can see right here, that's ink. I actually did rub it. Hey, Karen. I rubbed it and got the ink on the front of the card. And there's really no way to fix it unless I put a bow or an embellishment. But you would put the card together exactly the same way as the other two. So where is that piece? Let's see what it looks like. So there it is. It looks pretty nice. You can see these dark edges. They're still wet, so we'd have to let that dry. Maybe tomorrow, since I burnt the embossing powder on this piece, I'll do this one up and make my second card with the vellum. So let's make some room. And here is our card with vellum, our card with the blended front, and our card with the designer series paper. So I hope you like these techniques tonight. I'm gonna just quick. I did this when I did my first video, and for some reason it didn't record. But I just want to let you know there's a promotion if you would like to join my team, and I'd love to have you. You'll get $150 worth of product instead of the $125 for $99, and you get business supplies if you wanted to create a business, or if you just wanted to join for the discount. You can join just for the discount. You would get 20% off your orders each time you ordered. Also, I am on an international tutorial bundle team, and it's called Create With Us. This month, we each created a card using the sweet strawberry. I have this for sale for $20 on my blog, and if you order $50 from my store, I will send it to you for free. It contains 14 tutorials using the sweet strawberry bundle. If you were to join my team, all my tutorials or PDFs you get for absolutely free. All you'd have to do is ask. And then lastly, there's still time to purchase the You Are Amazing kit using this host code here. We're having the class on June 1st. It's at 7:30, and we will be creating 6 alternate cards, and there will be a PDF for this too. So if you buy the kit with that host code, I'll send you the PDF plus the link to the Zoom class, and it'll be a lot of fun. Hey Kathy, how are ya? That's okay. Thank you, Fran. Anita. Thanks, Karen. So there's tonight's cards. And again, every $35 or more that you spend, you'll get your little swag bag with foam tape, Terran tape, a Stampin' Spot, some mulberry flowers, about a yard of ribbon, 24 pieces of 6x6 designer series paper. Oh, and this one doesn't have it, but you also get one of these little craft erasers in there too. I forgot to put it in. And then your designer series paper. And it may not be this one. I have lots of packs. So, thanks for joining, everybody. I'll talk to you soon. Thanks, Karen. We really don't need a PDF for these, but I will have the directions and everything I use to create these cards with the measurements in a PDF tomorrow. So have a great night, have a better weekend, and I'll talk to everybody soon. Bye-bye now.